Hello YouTube! Yesterday I posted a video reviewing a program by Mike Israetel that ended up being a fake, meaning that the program wasn't actually by him. It was just by a guy who got inspired by his methods and tried to replicate a template by Renaissance periodization. And therefore many people pointed it out. Now, I already knew that going in because I'm the one who selected the program, and I'm going to explain in a second why I did it. But these people were rightfully pissed because I was critiquing a program and therefore the methods of Mike, even though he wasn't the author. And that's perfectly justifiable. I understand your anger. And therefore today, I want to correct my mistake. I'm going to present to you a program on Mike's channel that he ran himself and presented to people as is, so as to give him a fair review. I'm going to actually look at his methods. The reason why I committed that blunder yesterday is because if you look a program by Mike Israetel or RP, this is the first one that will pop up. It's the 6 days program I reviewed. And therefore, I also knew that many people would never actually check to see if Mike wrote it. They would just jump on it. And because the program was poorly crafted in its volume and in its frequency, I wanted to be able to help people reorganize the schedule because after my corrections, the program is actually quite decent. This is the reason why, one, I will not be deleting the video, first and foremost because I think it's cowardly to try to hide your mistakes, and two, because it's still of public interest. It's still going to help people find and distinguish, even if they just find out via the video that it's not actually Mike's program, it's someone else's. So this is for yesterday. Now let's focus on today. I'm quite happy with the program. It's someone on the channel who actually pointed it out, who helped me realize the mistake I committed, quote unquote. And it's similar because it's also a 6 days a week body part split. And it's fairly straightforward, so there's no mesocycles or things like this, at least not the way it's presented, which I believe is best because it's the trademark of a good program to be run immediately by people the second they have it in their hands. If they have to go through a 5-week seminar to be able to understand the mechanisms, in my opinion, it's overkill for 99% of people. But the funny thing with the program is that it's split between AM and PM, and that's quite rare. And I've heard many of you guys tell me if it was possible, and it is. But it's very complicated because now you double the amount of volume in a day. In a day, you double the amount of frequency, and the way the volume interacts from day to day is doubled. So it's extremely complicated. But because Mike has a reputation for being someone who knows how to program, it shouldn't be a problem. So I'm actually going to look at his methods and we're going to have a good time. Going to be honest with you, I'm quite happy to be able to make this video because I love reviewing templates and this one was very fun for me to review, so I hope you're going to have a good time. And if you're the type of person that likes Mike and listens to his advice, this is going to be a good way also to receive an outside perspective from someone that is not biased. I have nothing against Mike. I think he gives good advice, but I'm not a fanboy, and therefore I'm going to also help you understand what you should follow in his advice and what you should actually refrain from listening to. So the program itself is from RP's Mass Gain Training series. I watched the entire thing several times, so you don't have to. And while technically this is not a program that he wrote for people, it is still the way he trains himself, and it therefore constitutes training advice that he gives people. Let's not delude ourselves. Many people, they look at the way their favorite influencer train, and they train exactly like that. But I understand that some people might still have a problem with that, and will tell me, hey, this is still not a training template, you're still only reviewing the way he trains. I received that. The issue is that I could not find a training template by him that is not behind the paywall. So if Mike gives me the opportunity to review one of his paid programs for free, which I would happily do, or if someone sends me the template, I will review the male physique template. No problem with that. Again, I love doing reviews. But so far, for today, we are going to focus on that entirely. I think it is valid because something that I've noticed with people on this platform, me included, is that for the most part, the way people train is the way people teach. So you can learn a ton from the way they train themselves. And on top of that, as I said, there are always the problem of copycats who are just going to copy the training of the person that they like. And if that's the case, this review is going to make you understand whether or not you should train like Mike and if his methods are going to work for you. All right, so let's get started with Monday AM. This is the morning session. It's a push horizontal pull session, so it's upper body. And you open the day with a machine fly. First and foremost, it's an isolation. I do not recommend that for most natural lifters. You want to open your day with a heavy compound movement when you are the freshest. Mike explains that he wants to open with that because since there is a PM session on the same day that recruits the shoulder joint, he does not want to do a heavy press, and that is receivable within the context of what he presents. So it's a heavy isolation for the chest. 4 sets of 5, 50, 15 I find quite reasonable. I wouldn't even go as far as to say that 5 reps is a bit low on the machine fly. I would be afraid of a potential tendon injury in the pectoral muscle group. But because the 15 rep threshold is very high, most of the time you're going to have guys who are going to do 8 to 15, so it's okay. And there are reps in reserve, but all of the reps in reserve in the program are 0 to 1. We're going to get back to it, it's fairly useless. So you open with that heavy chest movement, then you do incline machine press. This is a great movement depending on if the machine is good or not. This is sort of the issue with machines. This is the reason why I rarely include them in programs, is because it's all or nothing. It's either a great machine that is even better than a compound movement with a barbell, or it's garbage that is going to get you injured, give you obvious injuries, etc. So you have to first and foremost check if the machine is good. If it's not good, as Mike says, you can do Smith machine. The Smith machine is okay. It's not the devil. You can use it for movements such as the incline press. It is a good movement. And if not, you can just use a barbell. 4 sets of 5 to 10 reps. Again, fairly low. And you'll see that it's interesting because this day is an outlier. The rest of the days are super high volume. This one is more focused on the intensity. Mike says it's because the chest responds very well to it. It's not the only muscle group that responds well to it. 5 to 10 is good. A 6 to 10 would have been good as well. And then you are going to do some prime rows. So it's a chest supported row for the most part. That is going to save the lower back and focus on the stretch. When you train the upper back, that is a good idea. Many people train the upper back and they don't realize that they mostly train arms because they do short, jerky movements like this and they don't let the back stretch. When you train the upper back, you want the upper back in its entirety to stretch. So any movement that prevents you from doing that because of instability is a bad idea, and any movement that allows the shoulder joint to protrude forward is a good idea. So this is a great movement to develop the entirety of the upper back. 10 to 20 reps, 4 sets. I like it. The rep range is a bit big, but for some people who lose a lot of reps with time, who are not super endurant, it might be good. So first day in the AM is a good day. So far, I have really nothing to say about that. Then Monday PM. So this is the afternoon session. Triceps, focused pull, vertical pull. So focused push, vertical pull. If you look at the AM and the morning wasn't too tiring. And it's important if you're going to schedule morning and then PM, because if you trash yourself in the AM, you're not going to want to go in for the PM, especially if the session is tiring. Upper body allows you to do that because upper body is not as fatiguing. We're going to see that I'm going to question the foundation of the program and the way it's scheduled. We're going to see if the AM, PM context and actual structure of the entire thing is needed, or if it can just be done away with entirely. So for this PM session, you start with a skull crusher GM style. He does it in the Smith machine. If you do it in a Smith machine GM style, it's mostly going to recruit the lateral head of the tricep. It is still going to recruit the long head, but it's not as severe. It's something to keep in mind because he wants to open with this movement to pre-exhaust the tricep to have them become the limiting factor on dips. So if you do something like a French press or a skull crusher with a ton of flexion of the spine, you will get more long head of the tricep, you won't tire the tricep pushers as much, and therefore the pre-exhaustion factor is not going to be as present. It's something to keep in mind because it's important, since you will follow this with paused dips, 4 sets of 10 to 12. I keep saying 10 to 20 for some reason. 10 to 12 for some reason. And you're going to do them body weight. So it's not going to be weighted, and it's because you're going to do them with a very, very vertical torso. So it's going to be to put the emphasis on the triceps, meaning that if you mess up on the opening style of the tricep movement, now the dips afterwards don't make much sense. It is something to keep in mind. So after your 4 sets of tricep isolation, 10 to 20 reps, you're going to do your pause dips, 10 to 20 reps again. 10 to 20 reps tend to be the bread and butter of the program. I prefer things like 8 to 12. I prefer higher intensities closer to failure. This is a bit high in my opinion, although a bodyweight movement like a dip can be higher. This is the type of movement where you can actually allow yourself to go higher. I would like to point out the fact that in this scenario, you could question why not just do weighted dips. And if you listen to what I said about the long head, it's possible. So what you could do for this day is you could open with a weighted dip and then you could do a tricep movement. But the reason why Mike doesn't do that is because the chest is pre-fatigued. You did heavy flies in the morning, so it's logical. He does not want the dip to be hard on the chest. Okay, I'm not going to question that. And then machine press, 3 sets of 10 to 20. So in this case, again, another machine movement and another pressing movement, but this time it's going to be in the axis of the body in front of you. So this is the chest movement for the day. And this is when I go back on what I just said. We did not do dips because you want to preserve the chest, but you still have a chest movement in there. And maybe it is less fatiguing on the shoulder because there is less stretching at the bottom. But what could be done is just get rid of the machine press and do your dips weighted. You open with them as a compound movement, and then you do your skull crusher. This only functions because Mike has made it work like this, but there is a better way to do that for people who want to save time. And then you're going to do some pull downs. So it's a lat pull down, 4 sets of 15 to 20. Very high rep range. It's not a bad thing for that movement. More upper back hook. So based on this, on these first 2 days, what I can say is that the exercise selection is good. The muscle selection is good. The rep ranges are a bit high. And there are some movements that are a bit too much, meaning that they're redundant. Only in the context of trying to pair the AM and the PM, because it's absolutely possible to take these 2 sessions and have them in the same day. And what would be the benefit? Well, the benefit is mainly gaining time, because you don't have to re-warm up and you don't have to go in for a second session. Many people don't just bodybuild, they also have a job, meaning that a second gym sesh is gas you have to pay, is driving to the gym, it's time you don't spend with your family or relaxing, and at the end of the week, it adds up. So when I say it's just time, remember that time is your most important resource. So if I were to consolidate the 2 days, which is something I'm going to keep doing, what you could do instead is both sessions together, you open with a heavy movement like a weighted dip. Then you're going to follow that up by a vertical press, like the incline machine press is absolutely fine. And then you're going to still have some isolation for the shoulder, for the tricep, and for the chest. So then you could do your long head of the tricep movement with a skull crusher, for example, an additional chest movement with the machine press or the fly, up to you, you can pick one or the other. And then you can do a row and you can do a pull down. If you are someone who can take all of that volume, maybe even the 2. So if I were to clean and clarify what I just said, open with dip without a superset. You follow the dip with an incline machine press without a superset. And then you do 2 supersets, one where you do machine flies and then you're going to do rows. And then another one where you do something like a machine press and then you do your pull downs. And there you have it. You can select one of the 2 sets at the bottom, or you can get rid of one if it's enough volume for you. And just like that, I saved you a ton of time. It's only 1 session. I also saved you some extra volume you will not be needing because you are not doing an AM and PM session. It might make sense for someone like Mike and his friends who are very advanced, but for someone like you, most likely, it's going to be a waste of time. Again, I'm trying to bring it back to you because this video is for you. It's not just a review for me to flex my programming muscle and to compare myself to Mike. That's useless. I make these videos to help you understand how to program and make good programs for you. So that was for the first 2 days. Let's look now at the Tuesday, where you're going to open the session, because there's going to be an afternoon session, with quads, hamstrings, and glutes. And you open with seated leg curl. Again, not a fan of that. As a natural bodybuilder, you will rarely, and by rarely I mean you should not open your sessions with isolation, especially for lower body day. You are fresh or excited to push weight, do a heavy knee flexion or heavy hip hinge. This is the two things that are justifiable on a leg day, in my opinion. Whatever style you like to espouse, keep the isolation stuff for the end when you have less energy, you're less dynamic, and you can do some static motions. He does that because Mike says that opening with arm strings does not hurt his ability to do squats. And I believe that, but only because he and his friends tend to do knee flexion heavy movements that have almost no hip hinge component. Sometimes, and in the video it was the case, even with a negative hip hinge component because the machine has you squat into it. So you're never bending forward. If anything, you're bending backward. Your back is like this. So in that case, of course, the arm strings are not going to be a limiting factor. But for you who does squats, it will be. So open with your squats always. And I see many people who like to warm up their hamstrings before squats. It helps their mobility. That's good. But that's a warm up. In this case, it's 4 sets of 10 to 20. That's not a warm up. Those are walking sets. So it's not a good idea. And on top of that, you do myoreps. So you're going to be completely cooked. After that, they do lever squat, 3 sets of 10 to 20. I like machines that put an emphasis on the quads. It's a good idea, especially for the type of people who struggle to recruit their quads because the hamstrings or glutes take over. So it's not a bad thing, and 10 to 20 for that type of machine is extremely good. What I would like to point out is that you have to pay attention to the pump and to the type of fatigue that creeps up on you when you do high reps with squats, because one, you could be limited by your cardiovascular endurance. It would be stupid to not go to failure because your lungs or your heart are going to not be able to actually take the brunt of the exercise and be tired before your muscles are. And on top of that, keep in mind that the more lactic acid enters the muscle, the more you struggle to move. It does not mean that you are done or that the muscle is going to failure. It just means that the set is so lengthened because of the amount of reps that you're losing out on very important reps. Do an experiment for me at home. Grab an easy bar curl, any type of bar that's easy for you to move, and go at it. Do as many reps as possible. And then look at the amount you did and compare that with the amount of reps you can do with your maximum weight on the bar for 10 reps. You will see that there is a discrepancy. You will not be able to match the number. Someone like me can do curls with 135 pounds for 8 reps. I cannot do 40 reps with an empty bar. Why? My arms become gorged with blood. Does it mean that the set with 40 reps is as effective as one that I could do with 135? Absolutely not. It is because it's a different type of fatigue. One is what I would call an artificial failure. You did not actually go to failure. And one is an organic failure, where the muscle is actually so tired you cannot do an extra rep. I'm certain that Mike knows this concept, so he doesn't fall for that, but there's a chance that you will fall for that. So since this is extremely prevalent with legs, pay attention when you do high reps for legs. Do not be limited by that type of thing. Just because you cannot squat anymore doesn't mean that you're done. It might just mean, again, that the reps were too lengthy. And then walking lunge, one set apparently here, of 20 to 30 reps. So it could be one set, it could be 5, it doesn't really matter. I think that doing body weight lunges is fairly useless, especially for someone very advanced. The only thing you're getting is a sensation. You're getting blood in your leg. So if you want to do it as a finisher, which is a term that I know Mike hates, you can do it if you just want, again, the fill, but don't count that as an exercise because it's not an exercise. If you want to do some muscle fiber damage, you want to actually weight the movement. You want to do weighted lunges. If not, you're just, again, doing that for a fill. It's a very central motion. That's mainly what I have to say for this day. Again, it's a disagreement in terms of ideology. I think that for natural lifters, this is not a good way to actually train. And you could really consolidate the day by doing something as simple as a hip hinge and a specific knee flexion. Meaning that you could be doing your heavy squat and then a hip hinge variation, and it could take care of that. It would take less time, and you would find that the amount of fatigue is similar. This is a topic that is going to come back, but Mike is adamant about fatigue to stimulus ratio. I think that here it's tough to argue that my method would produce more systemic fatigue than his. Maybe for the lower back, but the lower back is there to be used, right? You have a lower back for a reason. It's to do hip hinges, knee flexions, etc. The only reason why you would manage the lower back to the extent that he does, because he babies the lower back, is because you expect to use it another day. but it's not used. And I understand that this is peak week. It's 1 week of his exercise sessions. But again, because this is the selection I have to work with, this is what I'm going to base my argument and criticism on. And then for the afternoon session, you're supposed to do biceps, delts, and forearms. So I want first and foremost to say that this is good prioritization. It's good scheduling, because if you had opened the day in the AM by arms and then had the PM session be legs, it would be a massive blunder, because most people, if you tell them, hey, train in the morning, then come back again for legs in the afternoon, they'll skip because it's too tiring. So you open with the most fatiguing movements, and then the afternoon is arms, which most people love to train. So it's smart. You have to trick yourself. You have to play with the pyramid of priorities and put the things that are fun at the start. Because at the bottom, because if you put them at the start and the things that are at the bottom is not fun, you're just going to skip them. So for this arm day, it's essentially an arm day with biceps, delts, and forearms, you are going to open with spider curls, 5 sets of 10 to 20. Spider curls are great for people who like the stretch. And I see many people conflating spider curls with preacher curls and thinking it's the same. Spider curls is one of the rare motions where the elbows are stationary, where you can go all the way and extend the arm without it being risky, because the shoulders are not stationary, they're mobile. So you can flex them forward and they can accompany the weight, meaning that it's not dangerous for the biceps. So it's a good exercise. 10 to 20 reps, again, very high rep range, but because it's 5 sets, it makes sense. The set range always correlates with the rep range, always. If you have something like 2 sets of 10 to 20, now it makes no sense. The range is way too big for the reps. But because you'll go through your sets, most likely you'll get 20 reps the first one, then 18, then maybe 15, then maybe 12, then maybe 11. So it makes sense. This is justified. Then you do some machine delts, 5 sets of 10 to 20. So in a vacuum, that's already very high reps of isolation for the shoulders. But when you actually look at the fact that you train shoulders the previous day with presses, most people can handle that. Most people don't recover from all of these heavy presses in 24 hours. So this might be a quirk of Mike's training, because he is not natural. So we are not the same creature and the same beast. But I know that many people don't know that. So they'll just follow that and do the exact same thing. Not a good idea. For you, it's going to be a mistake. And then after that, we can see that there is direct forearm work, which contradicts what I spoke about yesterday in the previous program that had no forearm work. So it's good. It shows that Mike knows that you need to directly target the forearm. And something I appreciated in the video is that one guy was doing wrist curls, the other guy was doing something different with a barbell. And he was saying that it's because one guy liked this variation better. And this is the way to go. When you look at programs, this is the way to go. Do things that you like and that agree with your body. The thing with this program and this example of how to train, of a template, a training template for bodybuilding that Mike gave, is that he's flexible. He's not dogmatic in that sense, meaning that he has some dogmatic traits, but when it comes to exercise selection, it's open, and this is why his exercise selection tends to be the thing that I favor the most. These are good advice for the most part. So you do your forearm exercises, 5 sets of 10 to 20, and again, the set and rep combo is perfect. It's the same with the spider curls. That is a good day. So far, that is my favorite portion of the training. I think this is good. For anyone who wants to start doing arm days, it's a good example of an arm day. Just lower the reps a bit. Then we're going to do Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be a 1 session day. So you only train 1 time, and it's going to be in the morning. So you're going to open with straight arm pull downs, 3 sets of 10 to 20. And in this case, of course, again, it's an isolation movement. I would prefer you open with a compound like a pull-up. But the reason why bodybuilders, for the most part, the enhanced ones, don't do pull-ups is because they're too heavy for it. Meaning that their strength to body weight ratio is completely skewed, and therefore they can't. If that's the case, you do pull-down, but if not, do a normal pull-up. Mike himself agrees with that. After this, you're going to do deficit rows. I was happy to see that movement. It's a compound movement. You'll notice there is a big discrepancy between isolation and compounds in the program. For a natural bodybuilder and natural lifters in reality, the ratio should be skewed towards compounds. You should be doing more compounds. Now, it does not mean that in total numbers there should be more compound lifts, because compounds help you move more weight. But if there is a 50-50 ratio in terms of tonnage, it usually is a bad sign because it means you're doing too much isolation. The bread and butter of the program is always the compounds. And if I were to take a quick glance at the program, I would say that there is a 70-30 ratio of isolation to compounds here, which is again typical with pro bodybuilders. They do that all the time, but for you, it's not going to work like that. So the deficit rows, as I said, is a compound movement and a good one at that. And Mike does point out the fact that he uses it to offer a complete stimulus of the posterior chain, which is the way rows must be done. Barbell rows that are not supported are a total movement for the back. People who train lats and who think, I'm going to do rows, you'll do some lats, but you'll mostly get a lot of other things like the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings even, etc., etc. You need to be aware of that. Mike is aware of that. So he uses that properly for the posterior chain. And if you were to go back, this also now makes a lot more sense why he opens with a pull down. It's because Mike does a ton of volume-specific exercises where he can pinpoint exactly where the tonnage is going to go. That is fine, but it's also a huge waste of time for people who have other things to do in their life and who would prefer diffuse tonnage. Diffuse tonnage coming, of course, from compound movements that give you a more overall stimulus, not as precise, but it saves a ton of time. You don't need to directly target one muscle group. That can be done afterwards for the isolation. It doesn't open the day. He also doesn't like going under 10 reps. A quirk of his, don't do that if you're natural. Do reps under 10. The bodybuilding rep range of 8 to 12 is bullshit. You can do lower. You can do 3 reps for certain movements. You can do a 5 to 10, a 4 to 6, a 4 to 8. All of that is valid, and all of that still grows muscle. And it also is going to help you prevent plateaus, because if you constantly train above 10 reps, you're going to get less intense tonnage and less quality tonnage overall, which makes it harder to push volume down the line, something that anyone who has tried eventually finds out at some point. There is a balance. Now, after this, you are going to do some, in this case, pull downs. So more pull downs, not a bad thing. I would prefer rotating the grips, so maybe doing them with a chin-up grip or a neutral grip. I see a ton of pronated grip in his videos. In this case, if you had opened with a weighted pull-up, I don't think you would need the pull-down. You get the best of both worlds with just that one compound movement. And if you absolutely want a movement that is going to stretch the rib cage, I would always favor pullovers. So in terms of volume for that day, that half a day, it's not bad because the upper back can take a lot of volume. So this is not the issue here. The issue in this case is more the exercise selection and the way the exercises are positioned throughout the day. I would prefer, again, opening with something like a heavy pull-up, then you can do some deficit rows, and then you can end with some pullovers. That is a nice, short start of the day, and it's going to be great. After that, you are going to go, because I think I just told you that this was half of a day. No, this is the point. This is the full day. So you can allow yourself to do something a bit heavier with a pullover because that's all you do for the day. Is it a little bit wasteful maybe to do only that for Wednesday? I would say yes, if and only if the program wasn't so heavy on frequency. But because I know for a fact that on Thursday you're going to do AM and PM, you can consider that a recovery period. It's only Wednesday morning and it gives you a nice 24 hours, a full 24 hours, plus the fact that the day is low in total work to be able to recover and keep going. If you are the type of person that likes to train every single day, you have to keep in mind that frequency is going to make or break your program. If you are overtrained and you have to come in the next day, you're going to be toast. So after that Thursday morning, you do triceps-focused push. And I must say that these are my favorite days. The arm days, the ones that are focused around the triceps, the biceps, the delts, tend to be my favorite days. So you open with a Smith close grip bench, 3 sets of 10 to 20. That's already a great sign because when you do an arm day, if you're just getting started with arm days, it's fine to only do isolation, but at some point it's a waste of time. You want to include some compounds. And right now I see an immediate compound, so this is good. I just want to stop for a second on one thing that makes me laugh with the program and the method, and that is the reps in reserve. 0 to 1, but you're doing 10 to 20 reps. What is the use of a 0 to 1 reps in reserve for 10 to 20 reps? Right, you're going to save yourself the 20th rep. in this case, I think it's a little bit silly. Like, just do that rep. There's no risk of that rep. Struggle through it. Get some assistance. It's okay. Reps in reserve are, in my opinion, best used in shorter rep ranges because it saves you from entering the red zone or your form is going to break down, etc., etc. It allows for quality tonnage all the time with no injury risk. But in this case, you could just not do reps in reserve. It wouldn't change anything. After that, you do push downs, a single drop set of 4, so it's 8 total sets. That's a ton of work for the triceps directly, but for the push downs, it's not bad, especially because this time the rep range makes sense. 10 to 20, then you're going to modify for the drop sets. It's going to be very fatiguing, but it's not something that I would say is bad, especially because if you look at the rest of the program, you don't train triceps again until the next start of the week. So this is proper programming. You're going to trash the triceps. One could say it's junk volume, a little bit bro split-y. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but since you will at some point train arms again when the time comes on Saturday, for example, I think that this is okay because this is technically on Thursday, because this is Thursday morning. So it's to close the week. Of course, if it were me, I would take these 4 sets of triceps and I would place them somewhere else. I would maybe place them on the Saturday. I think it would make more sense. It would be higher quality volume, but it's not terrible. So after these drop sets of push downs, you are going to do some incline dumbbell press. The reason why they close the day is because it gives you some space from the opening close grip bench to recover and be more performant. So that's good. And on top of that, it's only 3 sets. I would modify the rep range and do 6 to 10 to be more intense. 10 to 20 is everywhere. And at this point, I'm repeating myself, but it was a criticism that I gave yesterday, even though the program wasn't by Mike, which is interesting because, by the way, the reason why I liked the program I reviewed yesterday is because it was following Mike's recommendations. It's still visible there. All of the things that were quirky in yesterday's program, written by someone who was not Mike and who was just listening to him, are still present today. I'm still saying the same things. Too much volume and high focus on the shoulders. It is still there, so drop the volume. It's too high. But it's a compound to finish the day. 3 sets are good. One thing that I would say is that there is, again, no long head of the tricep work. And when you look at the amount of space there is to put some long head of the tricep, I think it's a little bit damageable. We're going to talk about that later. But so far, I like the arm days the best again. And it's good because we continue with more arms. You do Thursday morning triceps and then Thursday afternoon biceps and more delts and forearms. You start with some cable curls. That's a good movement. And you do, in this case, so you're going to do a total of 5 sets. And you're going to do additional drop sets on top of that. So it's a lot of volume. And this is because Mike likes mind muscle connection. So you're going to end up going through a ton of motions to connect with the bicep, to connect with the muscles in particular. The issue with mind muscle connection is that if it takes away from intensity or the ability to do hard sets, I think it's a bit of a waste of time. Because someone like him can focus all of this time because it's the only thing you have to focus on. But I know that many people just lose themselves in it, especially in isolation movements, where you just go through the motion and you don't think about things. This is not the way to grow. And the longer the rep range, the longer the set, the more of a chance you have to just doze off and to think about something else. So I would condense the sets. Then you are going to do some delt drop sets with a machine again. And this is when we start entering the overkill. I think that Mike and his friends love training delts, like many pro bodybuilders. But for you, it's going to be just too much. You already did some presses in the morning. You're not going to be recovered from that. So it's not a good idea. I would slash it entirely. And if you slash it, you also realize quickly that essentially this is just an extra session for biceps, which for someone who is not them is not justified. Why would you go to the gym again just to do some bicep exercises? This is also an afternoon session that can just be melted within the morning session, and it makes a ton of sense. So again, I'm going to help you consolidate because the point is to help you program for yourself. So what you could do is you open with a closed grip bench, excellent movement. Then you can follow that up with something like a cable curl that is still going to be great. And you could even superset that with the push downs if you truly wanted. And then you can do some incline dumbbell press for an additional compound movement. And you superset that with another curl movement if you absolutely want it for the volume. And just like that, Again, we slash some movements, so you're not going to be more fatigued. It saves you a ton of time, and it opens more recovery windows. For the vast majority of the population, this makes a ton more sense. Then we move on to Friday. Friday will as well be a session when you only train one time, and it's good because it's going to be legs, so you're going to be extremely fatigued. Quads, hamstrings, and glutes. You start with lying leg curl. I'm not going to repeat myself, don't do that. And then you're going to do some hack squats. So it's sort of the same thing again. I'm not going to repeat myself. This is not the way for natural lifters to train. One thing I would point out, however, is that it's essentially the same day as the previous leg day. And when you're going to have a super high frequency program, the one thing you don't want is for the entire thing to go stale. You want things to feel fresh. You want to include more variations. I understand that the series was filmed in a different city. They didn't have a choice, but that's sort of the point. You're not training in your previous gym, so you don't have your habits. You can modify things. You can try new machines, etc., etc. And you can especially try new movements. For people who are going to try to run that program in their gym, who are not going to be traveling anywhere, please include variations. Please include knee flexion variations. In this case, you could pick 2 knee flexion variations and rotate from that. So every single week, you could do one or the other. And for every single day, it's going to be fresh. It's going to feel better. On top of that, if you follow my advice and you include some hip hinge, you can do the exact same thing with hip hinge. Pick 2 and then rotate through the 2. Your hip hinge will be the replacement for all of these leg curls that open the movement. And this makes a ton of sense because you have 2 leg days, meaning that for one, you can open with a knee flexion, then a hip hinge, and for the other one, you can do a hip hinge, then a knee flexion. And that way, you also prioritize one or the other because you start with one, so you are freshest and you are more performant. But if I take a look at the program again, I see more lunges. Now, something that makes me laugh with Mike's videos and his friends especially is that they seem to really like laying on the floor to the point where I wonder if all of that is just theatrics. Are these guys doing these rep ranges with these machines because they think it works best, or do they do it because it gives them the sensation that they're walking and they enjoy that? I mean, I understand. I used to sprint in the mountains. It feels good to have your legs full of blood and you can barely walk. But this is not the mark that you have done relevant work. It means nothing. The pump and the sensation in the leg, the lactic acid, means nothing. I don't know about you guys again, but for me, when I squat or I do hip hinges, like Roman and deadlift, to failure for 12 reps, I can walk afterwards. I'm tired, I felt it, but I can walk. I don't need to lay on the ground. So be careful with that type of stuff as well. I see that a ton with pro bodybuilders. They love rolling on the ground all the time. Maybe because they want to sweep the floor of the gyms. They're nice like that. They want to save some time for the janitors. But for you, don't do that. I've seen guys do that in the gym. You just look ridiculous. You just look like someone who is a try-hard and trying to be someone that they're not. So get rid of that. Again, do something time-tested, knee flexions, hip hinges. If you absolutely want to isolate the legs, do it afterwards and especially not as a replacement. So that is my my overview of Mike's leg days. This is my least favorite part of the way he trains. And if this is the advice that he gives and you receive, don't follow it because it's not good advice. This is not how to get big. And on top of that, out of the days of the program and all of these sessions, you only train leg twice. And yes, you do a shit ton of volume, you do a ton of lunges and things like this. But it's more beneficial for your mental health and your love of leg day to split it. Do leg days more often, every 2 days. Don't put all of the volume at once. This is not something you're going to be able to recover from. And you're going to accumulate junk volume, which is a big red flag when you look at any of Mike's programs. Granted, I only looked at 3 or 4, but every time I looked at one, it looked like there was too much volume. And in this case, it's a little bit tricky because if you just look, this is all of the work I did for this video, this is the sets. So you don't see many lines and you think, well, what volume? This is 3 lines with 3 sets for each exercise. That's nothing. Well, you do morning and afternoon and you do it every single day. It adds up. This is why you have to keep an eye on frequency. Volume in itself in a vacuum means absolutely jack shit. You could have volume for the Tuesday. It tells you nothing about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc., etc. You have to add it. You have to look at it in its entirety. It's why I said that people who program for morning and afternoon need to be extremely careful. So far, for natural lifters, I'm seeing a lot of problems for people who would follow that type of things. And you have noticed that every time I consolidate, I make one session And on top of making only one session, I cut down the volume. That is for a reason. It's because you want to keep the frequency high, you want to train every single day, you're going to have to cut down on volume. That is inevitable. So that was for the last leg day of the program. After that, Saturday morning is going to be vertical focused back assisted pull-ups. 4 sets of 10 to 20. Mike himself says that if you can, you should do regular pull-ups. Bodybuilders do assisted pull-ups because they're too heavy. That is great advice. Follow that advice. After that, prime pull-downs. Again, a back exercise focused on the stretch of the back. Great. 15 to 20 reps for 3 sets. A little bit incongruent because I think that the set range doesn't go well with the rep range. I would prefer something like a 10 to 13, 14, something like this. Maybe a 10 to 12 even, because the set range is so small and you want to stay within something that is quality and relevant. Although, if there are one type of exercise that you can go higher with the rep range, it's back, because a discrepancy of 5 or 10 reps multiplied by 3 sets is not going to kill your recovery. If the upper back is extremely resilient, if you do it properly, it doesn't rely on much tendon and much structure, so it's mostly pure back damage. This is my mea culpa in a sense also, because yesterday I said that the program was lacking back. Of course, it wasn't by Mike, but the guy who listened to his advice was either wrong or the advice was outdated because he barely put any back work. This is the opposite. There is a shit ton of back work. You're going to see that I'm going to also look at that, because for a natural, it's actually too much, which is a blasphemy because it's supposed to never be enough for the upper back, but in this case, yeah, it's a little bit overkill. But this is for the Saturday that then finishes with more rows. So you do your pull downs and then you do your rows. You notice that when Mike thinks training back, he thinks upper back and he thinks isolation with machines. Typical, but for natural lifters, it's not the way to go. It's like with the legs. If you tell me, today I train legs, okay, then I must see a knee flexion or a hip hinge. Same for the back. If you tell me today I train back, okay, then I want to see a heavy row at the start, be it supported or not. Or I want to see a heavy pull-up. I do not want to see the machines. The machines come afterwards. This is the way I have seen every single natural lifter train, and this is the way I've seen people get big. All of that machine stuff, again, induces junk volume, and it's not proper prioritization. If you absolutely love it and you see results, by all means, but if you stagnate and you plateau, this might be the reason why. It's because if we go back to the notion of stimulus to fatigue ratio, machine for the back have a very good fatigue to stimulus ratio, because again, you don't fatigue the tendons, you don't fatigue the spine. But keep in mind that you might want to fatigue these things because they give you results. It still results in tonnage. When people say, oh, it fatigues the lower back. Okay, but the lower back has musculature, it can grow. And most things that fatigue the lower back also fatigue the glutes and the hamstrings. There is a crying lack of posterior chain development in this program. There's not a single pull from the floor. I mean, I'm lying, technically there are rows, deficit rows, but there's no deadlift, there's no Romanian deadlift, there's no stiff leg deadlift. There are barely any hip hinges, and I say there are barely any hip hinges. There are no hip hinges in the program because, and this is something I said yesterday, people have quirks and people program with a bias. The bias of Mike is quad. He's a quad focused guy, just like he's a shoulders focused guy. Once you know it, because it's not a bad thing, you can program against it and modify it to fit your needs. And in this case, it means that, and we're going to get back to that, you are going to want to do more hip hinges and you're going to want to involve more lower back. You also will want to get some trap work in there because there's no direct isolation for the traps and there are no pulls. So the rhomboids and the middle traps will get worked and recruited because you're going to do some horizontal pulls, don't get me wrong. But the upper traps don't get a lot of love. There are upright rows in the program, but it's not going to be enough. So throwing in some trap work and some neck work as well might do. Neck work, I have never seen a pro bodybuilder train neck, so I'm not surprised that they don't. Maybe because it just grows with them. For you, if you have a pencil neck and you want it to grow, you're going to have to train neck. So do some isolation. It doesn't actually cost anything. And all of the things I told you to do, if you tell me, okay, but you told me there's too much volume, where do I put that? It's more volume. Well, you trade it with some upper back work. There's a shit ton of direct isolation for the upper back, is what I told you. It's even too much. remove it and add the things I told you. I will give you more information to modify the program further later. But this was for the morning. We're not done yet. The afternoon is what follows afterwards. And the afternoon is a delts, biceps, and forearms day. We're going to do some bent lateral supersets to bent upright rows for a total of 8 sets, 10 to 20 reps. That is a gargantuan amount of volume. Most people at this point, like their shoulders will not be able to take it. Even if you use baby weight, it's something that I must point out. It's very strange to see such big dudes, because they're big dudes, moving baby weight, like 20-pound dumbbells, 30-pound dumbbells. And I get it. Rich Piana, the late, said it the best. It's not about the weight you use, it's about the way the weight feels. I'm a weakling as well. Okay, I use baby weight as well for all of people's standards. But I go to failure, and I do it with relevant rep ranges. If you do a ton of movement with light dumbbells and 20 reps for 8 sets, that is a ton of junk volume. That is a mountain of junk volume. Maybe it helps these people grow because of the pump, and there's a big emphasis on the pump in the program, but for you, it's a waste of time. You're just going to be moving through space. If you know Mike Menzer said that doing high reps or doing too many sets was just weighted aerobics. I don't agree with Menzer's ideology because it's too high on the spectrum of high intensity, but this is the exact opposite. This is way too high on the volume. There is a middle ground, and the middle ground, in my opinion, is where naturals grow the best. Then you do some dumbbell curl drop sets. Dumbbell curls are great. Then some dumbbell wrist curl. All of that for 10 to 20. Dumbbell curls for 5 to 20 because of the drop sets, so it makes sense. Again, a ton of volume. We're going to get back to it. I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but yes, there's too much volume. And I think the shoulder superset in this case is also overkill. Now, if I were to consolidate again, I would tell you that if you slash some volume, you could absolutely fuse that day with the morning, because it's absolutely possible to do something that resembles a back plus delts and biceps and forearms day. Again, just out of the blue. I'm not even preparing any of that stuff. I'm just winging it. In 5 seconds, if I were to try to consolidate, okay, you take a look at this. You're going to open the Saturday with something like a heavy row, supported this time, we don't want to tax the lower back, or a heavy pull-up. All right, so that's a good movement for the upper back. Then you can do some bent upright rows, and you superset that with curls. Okay, great. Then you can do some pull downs or prime rows, and you superset that with some dumbbell wrist curls. And just like that, we're good. Just like that, you're done for the day. All of the rest is extra sets, extra reps that you will simply not need. Again, I don't like minimalism, but this is maximalism. And this is something that I understand pro bodybuilders do. I hear that all the time. It works for them, yes, but you have hundreds of thousands of people who follow that afterwards and they see no results. And they start detesting bodybuilding because they do so much work for nothing. Pro bodybuilders, they take everything, the kitchen sink, and they just throw it at the wall and they see what sticks. Because any type of volume is good volume for them, apparently, but not for natural lifters. This is the extreme. This is where minimalism is needed, and I come in with an axe and I cut down half of the forest. That way we can breathe and the other trees can get some nutrients and finally grow, and you have a proper forest instead. So that is that. Again, every time I make a program review, I have such fun because it's great. It's like I can enter the brain of someone else. And I'm sure that Mike would make a sexual joke about entering someone else's brain, but I'm not like that. So in this case, when I enter Mike's brain, I see the brain of someone who, again, loves volume and likes to focus on certain movements. Is it the type of things that you need to focus on? No. Does it mean that he gives good advice? No. I see too many people who don't like him because he's smug. That might be right. He's smug for a reason. He knows his shit. But I also think that in this case, this is typically something that you don't want to do. It doesn't mean that the thing is bad. It means that if you just take it down a notch and you chill for a second, there is something good, right? This is a cake, a delicious chocolate cake covered with a mountain of powdered sugar. And I just remove all of that sugar that's not needed, that's going to give you diabetes, and there you have a good cake. Eat the good cake. This is not a bad thing. But as you have seen, the AM/PM format is not really usable here. The only time where it made sense, in my opinion, was for the Tuesday. The Tuesday is where it made the most sense because you open with legs and then you do PM in the afternoon. So for people who need that type of scheduling, it might be doable. But all of the other days, the split was just completely unjustified. And on top of that, because you had to go to the gym, you have to justify being there, and therefore you do junk volume. So if we are to make a proper AM/PM program, I'm going to have to do it myself so that I can teach you guys how to do it properly if this is the type of things that you like. Well, I'm also going to be able to look at the advantages, the disadvantages, and do something proper. And this is going to be it for this video. So as a conclusion, overall, the rep ranges can all be brought down. All of them can be brought down, right? So from 10 to 20 to like 10 to 12 or 8 to 12 or 6 to 10. All of the sets can be brought down. A ton of movements can just be removed entirely and consolidated. What you can do, it's what I recommend is you take 2 isolation movements and you can trade them for 1 compound, even maybe 3 isolation movements. And that way, the program is more solid, it's more compact. The shoulder volume can absolutely be brought down. The lunges on low day and the hamstring isolation can be replaced with hip hinges. The AM/PM system is unnecessary save for 1 day. There's no long head of the tricep work, not enough. There's only 3 sets. And it's with a movement that doesn't bias it. There's no neck, there's no calves, there's no abs. Again, it's 1 day in the week, so maybe it's 1 week in the life, so maybe he does isolate that outside, but you need to isolate these body parts, and you have space because there's a ton of work for the other body parts that is not needed. And overall, the methodology of the entire thing is not the way naturals should train. So again, if some of you guys want to send me another template by Mike, or you tell me, oh, well, this one is good, I'll review 15. All right, this is fun for me. This is like an afternoon at Disneyland for me, minus all of the creepy things that walk around and I'm supposed to pretend I like them because they're from cartoons. And this is going to be that. So this is great. If you have at some point another bodybuilder that trains a certain way and someone is nice enough to write all of the sets and all of the reps for me, I'll make more reviews because I think that it can help you differentiate between natural lifting and enhanced lifting, and also understand what is good to take in these people's advice and what should be ignored. And I'm going to leave you with that. I actually have another big video for you guys tomorrow that also includes Mike. You're going to start to think that I'm in love with him, and I might very well be. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.